This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick.
Chapter 31. The Igloo Situation. I mean, the farce knows. And our symbol is the shield and spears.
I don't really get the shield and spears on this one.
I see what you mean, I think. They are both Aiel.
Technically, yes. I'm going to go with a representation of something spherical and something long and pointed.
Oh gosh. Well, that's what this is, isn't it?
Basically. What was it when they bang the spears against the shields? Rand and Avienda going to be banging the spears. Or is this wash the spears?
Is there like snowflake symbol?
No. There's a star for the sea folk.
I don't know what else would actually work.
I might go with something Shan-Chan related, since this is technically in Shan-Chan.
You could do the Aes Sedai symbol. The next chapter has the bug helmet.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, I'm going for shield and buckler because of Avienda. That would be like, she's Aiel, that's her symbol. You know, you can't use the female half of you can't use the tier, because that's for the Aes Sedai. They just use the dragon.
Yeah, I think the only other one that would make sense is the full Aes Sedai symbol.
Yeah, and then I can make jokes about that.
The streets of Einrod ran straight and met at right angles, where necessary, slicing through hills that were otherwise neatly terraced with stone. The slate-roofed stone buildings had an angular look, as if they were all vertical lines. Einrod had not fallen to Couladin. No people had been there when the Shido swept through. A good many of the houses were only charred beams and hollow ruined shells. However, including most of the wide 3-story marble buildings with balconies that Moraine said had belonged to merchants, broken furniture and clothes littered the streets, along with shattered dishes and shards of glass from windows, single boots and tools and toys. The burning had come at different times. Rand could tell that much himself, from the weathering of blackened timbers, and how much smell of char lingered where. But Lan had been able to chart the flow of battles by which the town had been taken and retaken, by different houses contending for the Sun Throne. Most likely, though from the look of the streets, the last to hold Einrod had been brigands. A good many of the bands roaming Cairhien held allegiance to no one, and to nothing, except gold. It was to one of the merchants' houses that Rand went, on the largest of the town's 2 squares, 3 square stories of grey marble, with heavy balconies and wide steps, with thick angular stone side rails overlooking a silent fountain with a dusty round basin. A chance to sleep in a bed again had been too good to pass up, and he had hopes that Avienda would choose to remain in a tent. Whether his or with the wise ones, he did not care, so long as he did not have to try going to sleep while listening to her breathe a few paces away. Recently, he had begun imagining that he could hear her heartbeat, even when he had not taken hold of Saidin. But if she did not stay away, he had taken precautions. The maidens stopped at the steps, some trotting around the building to take positions on all sides. He had feared that they would try declaring this a roof of the maidens, even for the one night. So as soon as he had chosen the building, one of the few in the town with a sound roof and most of the windows unbroken, he had told Sulin that he was declaring it a roof of the Winespring brothers. No one could enter who had not drunk from the Winespring in Emond's Field. From the look she had given him, she knew very well what he was up to, but none of them followed him beyond the wide doors that seemed to be all narrow, vertical panels. Inside, the large rooms were bare, though white-robed Gaishain had spread a few blankets for themselves in the broad entry hall. Its high plaster ceiling worked in a pattern of severe squares. Keeping Gaishain out was beyond him, even had he wanted to, as much so as keeping Moraine out if she was not asleep elsewhere. Whatever orders he gave about not being disturbed, she always found a way to make the maidens let her by, and it always took a direct command for her to go before she would leave.
Well, she is part of the Brotherhood of the Wine Spring. She did drink from the Wine Spring Inn.
Didn't think of that, did you, Rand?
Oops. She can honestly say, yes, I am part of that group. Maybe he did think of it. I wonder about that sometimes. How much does he want her help and give her holes to work through?
Yeah, I mean, if he really wanted to seal a room off, no one would be able to stop him.
And I just love the little hints about how much he really likes Avienda. Just how much her breathing is driving him nuts because he just can't stop listening to it, and how much he's going to miss it. And it's very romantic. I really like their relationship.
Weird antagonistic way to fall in love, but
I know, but
right. Each situation is unique. I'm not saying it's unlikely or it's just far outside of my realm of experience, I guess. And Rand he's walking around to pick out his bedroom in this building, and he walks into a room the guy Shane have set up for him. And there's apparently a bed in there and a wash basin and stuff. And he walks in, and Avienda's just standing there naked, washing herself.
Oops. Which is not something she normally does because the water, she probably lost track of time or didn't really know what was going on because normally she wouldn't use water.
She would go to the sweat tent. But since they're in Cairhien and she seems to think it was impossible to set up a sweat tent in the spaces they had been given, she decided to, and she stammers her way through this, standing there naked as they're staring at each other.
Whoops. Because she's just panicking, basically. She's I didn't mean to.
It's an Aiel move.
It is an Aiel. They recommended Rand do it for her, which is accidentally be bathing and act all coy when you get caught. And she's wait, shit, no, fuck.
I didn't arrange this.
It's not what I'm doing here. And she just totally panics. No, I didn't arrange this. But that is what someone of her rank would do if she was trying to entice him. And so it's just it's accidentally giving it's accidental flirting with someone she actually does like, and so it's
where normally
Rand
might be invited to the sweat tent of one of her cousins where she just so happened to be or something. And then she's oh my god, I have to get the hell out of here. And
apparently out of here is really far out of here.
So far away, the other side of the world.
And probably a different hemisphere, with the seasons being different, as we know from our Australian friends. When it's winter up here, it's summer down there, and vice versa. So Rand is getting hit with just a crazy, crazy heat wave, and the Shan-Chan are getting hit with a crazy, what I would assume, cold wave.
I saw someone ask this question a minute ago. It was just as I was about to start reading, so I didn't answer it, but it was basically, is anyone wondering why it would be hot in Cairhien but cold in Shan-Chan? And remember that Shan-Chan is a really long continent. So I think probably two different reasons. One, we don't know where they are in Shan-Chan. They could be at the top of the tallest mountain, where it just always snows. But also, they could be in a completely different region, far to the south or further to the north or whatever.
My assumption is always very far to the south. Very cold. And not nearly as dry, obviously. I think that's the big difference. Because, Avienda's experienced cold before. The waste gets very, very cold at night. It does get below freezing, but she's never experienced the snow and the ice.
Right.
Because there's never been enough water.
There's not enough moisture in the air for that to ever happen. Avienda is standing there naked, awkwardly trying to explain why she's standing there naked, and she's oh my god, I have to get out of here. And suddenly a shimmering vertical line appeared in the air near her. It widened, as if rotating, into a gateway. Icy wind rushed through it into the room, carrying thick curtains of snow. And I think this is one of our first gateways.
Yeah, other than gateways into either Tel Riyadh or skimming.
I must get away, she wailed and darted through into the blizzard.
It's basically a Wilder talent, as best as I can tell. And it's not something she ever remembers how to do until she's taught how to do it by somebody else.
Yeah, this is an accident, and she really just is incredibly singularly focused on getting as far away from Rand as she possibly can, and it works, because she's a powerful channeler.
Yeah, she's a powerful channeler, and that's what we've seen. Powerful channelers are able to just spontaneously do certain things. It's like with Andral. He is pretty much a natural with gateways because, that's what he's attuned to doing is traveling.
Immediately, the gateway began to narrow again, turning, but without thought, Rand channeled, blocking it at half its former width. He did not know what he had done, or how, but he was sure this was a gateway for traveling, such as Asmodean had told him of, and been unable to teach him. There was no time for thinking. Wherever Avienda had gone, She had gone naked into the heart of a winter storm. Rand tied off the floes he had woven as he ripped all the blankets from the bed and tossed them onto her clothes and pallet. Seizing blankets, clothes, and rugs all together, he plunged through, only moments behind her. And then there's this long chase scene, which I don't think it's too important to read.
Well, the one thing I will say about that chase scene is it mirrors almost perfectly the dream Egwene sees Aviendha having, where this big monster is behind her, and then she realizes it's the Karakarn. And she's running from him. Like this, I do think, and as we see later, I think the rings gave her a vision of exactly this happening.
Of her being chased.
And that's what was of her being chased. And at the end of it, she's captured and ravished. And so that's why she...
Well, someone's ravished.
Fees. Well... She's ravishing.
Seems to me Aviendha is the only one that knows what's going on. It's not 100% clear, but...
I would say he knows what's going on, but she definitely initiates. She makes the decision.
Oh, yeah, he's not completely clueless, but...
Not completely clueless. The nicest thing you can say about Rand.
I don't think Aviendha's a virgin. She doesn't seem shook at all, after... This doesn't seem like a remarkable experience to her.
Whereas I believe he is.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever... Yeah. We're pretty clear that he was sort of promised to Egwene, but they never did anything, and then there was all this travel, and... Oh, Pookie Penguin, do you think so? She's at least acting like it's no big deal. But, she makes a good point about that she was, really awkward around boys. Like, she just was so dedicated to the spear, she never really even thought about boys.
That could be. But I had just assumed this wouldn't be her first time, because she's old enough to have wanted to be romantic, and amongst the Aiel, there's no stigma.
No, I just, as far as I know, she was just so dedicated to the spear. She literally had no interest in boys until Rand al'Thor. She was like, I don't care about boys. I don't want to know. I really just don't care.
I could buy that too. A lot of people don't get there until later in life.
Only after Rand came into her life, and she was kind of the spear was kind of taken away from her.
Yeah, she wasn't stoked on that. Rand jumps through the gateway. He's chasing her. He's like, you don't know what you're getting. Like, you're going to die out there. Like, you've got to come back. And he starts chasing her because she just starts running harder. And she eventually runs out onto a lake bed or a pond bed or something.
I think it's a stream. I think it's like a stream with like a layer of ice on top and then moving water underneath.
And as she's running, the ground collapses, or the ice collapses, and she falls in. She would totally have died if Rand hadn't been chasing her.
Oh, yeah, totally. Of course, maybe she wouldn't have run onto the lake if he hadn't been chasing her either.
Maybe.
But she did jump into freezing cold weather, naked and wet. So she probably wouldn't have lasted too long, even without shelter.
The water would accelerate that, but she is naked in a blizzard. She doesn't have long.
No, and I don't think she's a good enough channeler yet to have kept herself alive. She has a few spells, a few skills, but I don't think she could have done what Rand did, which was construct an igloo and keep it warm with the power.
Right. Rand presumably, he drags her out of the lake or the river or whatever it is. Drags her out of the freezing water and quickly builds this igloo, presumably using like flows of air like you would use the back end of a snow shovel to pack snow.
Yeah, he's basically has a backhoe made of air.
Yeah. And he kind of warms the air in there in exactly the way you're supposed to so that it freezes inside.
Well, don't forget, this is after he pulls her out. So first he lays down just a path of melted glass, basically creates an entirely, melts a huge patch of the ground.
Of sand.
To provide heat.
Yeah.
Of sand, yeah. Before he gets her out. So she's in the water for a solid minute.
Quite a while. When he reaches in, the last line I had highlighted here is that he felt frozen hair crackling. So that would take, it depends on how cold it is, but her hair would have to be wet and she'd have to be outside for at least a few moments for it to freeze like that.
Hey, at least she didn't get swept away. That was sort of the one thing I was always concerned about when I was reading this, is what if she goes under, if this is a river and she goes under the ice, she could be swept feet downriver. So I guess maybe it's not a river. Maybe it was more of a lake bed or something like that. Because otherwise, I think she would have been pulled away by the current. Sort of think of a current underneath the water.
No steam rose from the black water, stream or river. It was too big for the amount of his channeling to warm the swift-moving flow, even a hair. He initially considers turning it into a bath, so if it had been like a small pond, maybe he could have done it, but it's like a big river.
If he had his Angreal on him, I bet he could have, like, dammed it off and then, like, heated just an area. Or diverted it, maybe?
Maybe.
It would have been interesting to see what else he could have done. Just, I kind of like what he came up with, but...
Yeah, ran smart. Being farm boy from backwoods nowhere seems to have actually taught him a lot. A lot of this stuff I feel like most people wouldn't know to do. He pulls her out of the water immediately, starts the fire, covers her in all the clothes and stuff that he brought initially without even thinking. He grabbed all that stuff because he knew the only way to save her life was going to be to get her covered.
Yeah, because she was naked. Astrid makes a good point that even if she had survived and Rand hadn't been there, she probably would have been captured by the Damani that came along shortly thereafter.
Oh yeah, there's no way out for multiple reasons.
Yeah, and she wouldn't have been able to make a gateway back.
Probably not. So even if she survived the storm, she would have been stuck on the other side of the world, and then she'd have to survive the Shan-Chan, which is not likely.
I assume she'd survive, just being... I don't know. What do you think would happen if Aiel was captured by Shan-Chan? Do you think she'd kill herself? Do you think they'd keep her captive? How do you think that would work?
I think Aviendha would try very hard to kill everyone around her until eventually she realized that that's not possible. She'd eventually be broken just like everyone else. I think it would be hellish for both parties because I think Aviendha would hold out way longer than most people.
I guess we do see in her flash forward the Shan-Chan do manage to take the Aiel channelers prisoner and break them, so that they don't seem to have any special ability to avoid the bracelet.
Yeah, it's a thing of power. That's not even regular torture, right? Like it'll hit you back. So if Aviendha gets collared and then tries to stab somebody and probably succeeds because she's a trained warrior, she might end up stabbed. I don't know exactly how that would work, but we saw Egwene's black eye.
Oh yeah, no, if she stabbed somebody bad enough to nearly kill them, she'd die from that pretty much instantly. If it was the same person she was attached to. There's not a lot to like speculate about. This is just like, ooh, this is what happens. So this is almost like a battle chapter, which in a way makes a lot of sense, right?
Action-packed.
War. No rules in love and war.
This is the love part. And this is after Rand drags her out of the water, puts her on the hot patch that he made on the ground, builds the igloo, drags her inside of it, or built it around her? I forget. Not important. Heats it up there.
He drags her inside.
In there, and then uses another good trick where he gets under the blankets with her to make it even more likely that she'll survive. Use his own body as a heater.
That's a fantasy trope.
No, it's real.
I swear to God, I know, but like you don't have to get naked.
No, you don't. I mean, you shouldn't be wearing like your full parka and stuff because that'll hold your body heat into you. You want to share it. Same, like anyone knows the difference in feeling between like if you're sleeping with your partner in bed and you are using one blanket, it's way warmer than if you're using two separate blankets because it's your combined both of your bodies as heaters. It heats up way faster.
He may the getting in naked with the girl is something that as we pointed out, many fantasy tropes. It is a fantasy trope.
It occurred to me while I was reading this to do notes for this chapter. I was like, if I ever got caught in this horrendous situation, I know that's a thing, but I'd probably keep like t-shirt and underwear on.
Yeah.
Don't be presumptuous, right. But do what you can.
And he doesn't like dry her off or anything. They're both wearing, everything's wet anyway.
He's laying there for a time, and he's kind of like stroking her hair and talking to her a little. And I started at, I should have knocked, he says, and then thinks, at his own bedroom door? I know you do not want to be around me. You don't have to be. Whatever the wise ones want, whatever they say, you are going back to their tents. You will not have to come near me again. In fact, if you do, I'll send you away. Why hesitate on that? She gave him anger, coldness, bitterness when she was awake and asleep. It was a crazy thing to do. You could have killed yourself. He was stroking her hair again. He could not seem to stop. If you ever do anything half so crazy again, I'll break your neck. Do you have any idea how I will miss hearing you breathe at night? Miss it? She drove him crazy with it. He was the one who was mad. He had to stop this. You are going away, and that's it. If I have to send you back to Ruidian, the wise ones can't stop me if I speak as Karakarn. You won't have to run away from me again. The hand that he could not stop from stroking her hair froze as she stirred. She was warm, he realized. Very warm. He should be wrapping one of the blankets about himself decently and moving away. Her eyes opened, clear and deep green, staring at him seriously from not a foot away. She did not seem surprised to see him, and she did not pull back. He took his arms from around her, started to slither away, and she seized a handful of his hair in a painful grip. If he moved, he would have a bald patch. She gave him no chance to explain anything. I promised my near sister to watch you. She seemed to be speaking to herself as much as to him, in a low, almost expressionless voice. I ran from you as hard as I could, to shield my honor, and you followed me, even here. The rings do not lie, and I can run no more. Her tone firmed decisively. I will run no more. Rand tried to ask her what she meant, while attempting to untangle her fingers from his hair, but she clutched another handful, on the other side, and pulled his mouth to hers. That was the end of rational thought. The void shattered. Saidin fled. He did not think he could have stopped himself had he wanted to, only he could not think of wanting to, and she certainly did not seem to want him to. In fact, the last thought he had of any coherency for a very long time was that he did not think he could have stopped her. Some considerable time later, 2 hours, maybe 3, he could hardly be sure, he lay atop the rugs with the blankets over him, and his hands behind his head, watching Avienda examine the slick white walls. They had held a surprising amount of the warmth. There was no need to latch on to Saidin again, either to shut out cold or to try warming the air. She had done no more than rake her fingers through her hair on rising, and she moved completely unashamed of her nakedness. Of course, it was a bit late to be ashamed of something as small as having no clothes on. He had been worried about hurting her when dragging her out of the water, but she showed fewer scrapes than he did, and somehow they did not seem to mar her beauty at all. "What is this?" she asked. "Snow." He explained what snow was as best he could, but she only shook her head, partly in wonderment, partly disbelief. For someone who had grown up in the waste, frozen water falling from the sky must seem as impossible as flying. According to the records, the only time it had ever rained in the waste was the time he had made it. He could not stop a sigh of regret when she began pulling her shift over her head. "The wise ones can marry us as soon as we get back." He could still feel his weave holding her gateway open. Avienda's dark reddish head popped through the neck of the shift, and she stared at him flatly, not unfriendly, but not friendly either. Determined, though. "What makes you think a man has the right to ask me that? Besides, you belong to Elaine."
Never given that one up, is she? You belong to Elaine. You belong to Elaine. Okay. I love the way Jordan hides the really important information in the sexy times. You followed me even here, the rings do not lie, and I can run no more.
Yes.
That little sentence there tells you everything you need to know about her behavior over the entire, last book and a half towards Rand. Once she went into the rings and she saw that, she knew that he would follow her, and she would. So that sentence right there is, where I base almost all of my Avienda emotional baggage.
And I really like that Avienda's get married. What?
No, that's not going to happen. Not only is that not going to happen, but you ain't sleeping with me again, ever. That was a one-time thing.
She does say this will not happen again.
Yeah. And in fairness, she's a little disappointed. And it ends, it does end up happening after. It, of course, does happen again. Yeah. Once she gets together with the other two girls and they all become near sisters and figures out her toe, and then they can all get married together once that's all forgiven. But they have to get past all that stuff. Because she does.
Yeah. Does she eventually... How does she end up getting back together with Elaine? I can't remember.
So when he sends Matt and the band to go get Elaine, he sends Avienda to Elaine with Matt. He's like, go get Elaine, and Avienda's going with you. Or she says she's going.
And she spends the whole trip sharpening a knife, and Matt's like, what the fuck is she planning on doing?
That's right. And then she offers it to Elaine and says, hey, this is if you want to take my life.
Yeah, you can do...
I slept with him.
Yeah.
And Elaine's like, no, I would never... You what? She's like, has to stop herself from grabbing the knife. It's like, Elaine may be a little more aggressive than she gives herself credit for. A little more jealous at first. But, they get over it.
The next couple of pages are really just Matt and Avienda trying to make sense out of how their relationship fits into what their culture thinks of relationships, and their cultures are so different that they end up both kind of walking away from this conversation totally confused.
Yeah. Randon.
And Avienda.
I think you said Matt.
Oh.
Matt and Avienda.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, too much talk about Matt in that last little part there.
But yeah, they really both, like, they're figuring out, like... And she's like, well, your brother would have to, because your father's dead, but his father's not dead, because his father's Tam, and...
Avienda thinks of Rand's father as Janduin.
Right. And then he sort of relates that back to an old story he heard about two people who were going to get married, but were fooling around and got caught, and got forced to get married early. Just some cultural back and forth. I don't have a lot to say about it.
Yeah, me neither.
Other than, this is where Avienda says she has toe towards Elaine, and she's then fulfills it by offering Elaine her life. And also, I like this, she had no call to tell him he had a pretty behind.
I think she's got call to, my man.
I think you do.
It's not weird. You see, since I started it, we have to marry. It doesn't matter about permissions. You started it. Her sniff was pointed and meaning. Aiel, Andoran, or anything else, women use those noises like sticks, to prod or thump. It does not matter anyway, since we are going by Aiel costumes. This will not happen again, Rand al'Thor. He was surprised, and pleased, to hear regret in her voice. You belong to the near sister of my near sister. I have toe to Elaine now, but that is none of your concern. Are you going to lie there forever? I have heard that men turn lazy, after, but it cannot be long until the clans are ready to begin the morning's march. You must be there. Suddenly, a stricken look crossed her face, and she sagged to her knees. If we can return, I'm not certain that I can remember what I did to make that hole, Rand al'Thor. You must find our way back. He told her how he had blocked her gateway, and could still feel it holding. She looked relieved, and even smiled at him, but it became increasingly clear as she folded her legs and arranged her skirts that she did not mean to turn her back while he dressed. Fair's fair, he muttered, after a long moment, and scrambled out of the blankets. He tried to be as nonchalant as she had been, but it was not easy. He could feel her eyes like a touch, even when he turned away from her. She had no call to tell him he had a pretty behind, but he had not said anything about how pretty hers was. She only said it to make him blush anyway. Women did not look at men that way. And they don't ask their mother's permission to... He had an idea that life with Avienda had not become one bit easier.
I would say not. Not in the slightest.
Oh, Rand.
Oh, Rand.
Just in that, like, she only said it to make him blush. Nah, probably just, 'cause she thought it.
Right. That's probably not a big deal for her. She's just
it wasn't a manipulative move. She just thinks your butt looks good. That's all.
It's just a cultural difference. It's like saying your eyes look nice. And Aiel would never do it. Also, they're very attractive people.
True.
In your early 20s, walking around constantly, moving, fighting, training, peak of physicality, decent genetics.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?